Hi everyone and welcome to class. I just want to remind you guys that even though I'm not there, does not mean that you should not be taking your work seriously and working really hard because we are moving on and your test is projected to be next week on Friday. So that means if you have questions and you don't understand something about the chapter, that I need you to send me an Emoto message and let me know that you don't get something or you're confused, okay? So we left off about talking about Monroe's presidency and how it was known as the era of good feelings. There was four major reasons, and we've talked about three of them. One of them being the economy. Money was good during this time period. They created the Tariff of 1816 that allowed put a tax on those foreign goods, and it encouraged people to buy American goods because they were cheaper than goods from Britain. They also created the American system by Henry Clay, and this really improved the infrastructure, like the bones of the country, transportation, buildings, and so forth. They also reinstated the Second Bank of the U.S., lending out money and a safe place to deposit your money. We also talked about three Supreme Court cases during Monroe's presidency: McCulloch v. Maryland, Woodworth v. Dartmouth, and Gibbons v. Ogden. Though all three Supreme Court cases were about different topics, the end result is that it's strengthening the federal government, making the country stronger. Aren't you talkative? The third one was the Adams-Onis Treaty. And the Adams-Onis Treaty is where the Spain ceded Florida to the U.S., meaning Spain gave up Florida and gave it to the U.S. So then the U.S. was from the Louisiana Territory all the way east to the Atlantic Ocean completely. And one of the reasons why they gave it up was because their control was weakening. And a lot of escaped slaves were moving into Florida because they were promised their freedom, and we talked about that before. Oh, yeah? But they sent Andrew Jackson to go get these slaves back because Southern plantation owners considered them property, and they were not happy about not having their property. So when Andrew Jackson came to get the escaped slaves, he kind of looked around and said, well, while I'm here, I might as well take over some cities and take over some important towns. So that's what he started to do. And with this, Spain then said, okay, we can't control it, we can't protect it, it's time to give it up. So Spain gave up Florida in the Adams-Onis Treaty. Oh yeah, Pipes, you happy about that? The fourth reason, which we're going to talk about today and focus on, that Monroe's presidency is known as the era of good feelings, is the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, I'm going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine, then you're going to get a PowerPoint to take notes, and then you are going to do some activities. Capiche? Say, caposh, capiche, caposh, capiche, caposh. Okay, so the Monroe Doctrine. A lot of countries in South America and that were controlled by Spain, say Mexico, were really inspired by the United States' newly gained independence. And they wanted to kind of jump on the bandwagon. They saw the opportunity to gain their independence and they took up on it. So countries in South America and Mexico started to fight their European oppressors or countries that controlled them, say Great Britain or France or Spain. And the U.S. decided to make a statement saying they're going to formally recognize these newly independent nations. A lot of the independent nations, their movements were led by this man named Simon Bolivar, and his nickname became known as the Liberator, because what does it mean to liberate? Raise your hands. That's exactly it. To liberate means to free. So Simon Bolivar led a lot of these movements. And the U.S. recognized these newly independent nations as their own countries. the U.S. was kind of quick to say, oh, we're going to recognize these as independent, and because the U.S. could relate to what they were going through. They felt they needed to support them because the U.S. just went through the same thing, fighting off Great Britain for their independence, and now these South American countries are doing the same exact thing. So the U.S. needed to create the Monroe Doctrine. And basically what it said is in 3 parts. Ooh. Okay. It had 3 parts. The first part says that they're going to recognize this land, these newly independent nations, as independent. The second part of the document says that if these European colonies come back and try to recolonize the newly independent nations, the U.S. is going to consider it a direct threat to their peace and prosperity. We're going to time out right there. If you think about it, if you close your eyes and you picture the world's map, these Southern American countries or South American countries are really close to the U.S. and Mexico borders the United States right now. So if Europe tries to reclaim this land and starts a war, it's going to disrupt a lot of peace in the U.S. and maybe a lot of trade, and it can hurt the economy and so forth. And the U.S. isn't going to stand for it. So what they say to the European nations is, if you come and try to recolonize, we will consider it a direct threat to our peace and prosperity. And the part 3 says, we will take up arms and declare war basically against you. Like, we're not afraid of you. We will stand up to you. It's almost like the U.S. is standing up to these European bullies, like these big powerhouses, and standing up for the little guy instead. So what he does is the U.S. creates this document and kind of really says that the U.S. is a strong nation and they're not afraid of these European nations anymore, and they're going to stand up for these other countries. So that is the Monroe Doctrine. Right, Pipes? Right. So what I want you to do right now, please, is I want you to take out a white, beautiful, line clean sheet of paper, and I want you to label it the Monroe Doctrine. Say, so big. Say, so big. And you're going to take notes on the Monroe Doctrine, and then you're going to read some primary sources, and then you're going to look at 2 political cartoons. Okay? If you have any questions on the Monroe Doctrine, please do not hesitate to send me an Emoto message. I am hoping to be back in work on Friday, but I keep saying that, so we shall see. Okay, Mommy's going to come pay more attention to you now. Say goodbye, everybody. Bye, guys. Be fabulous.